Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. With hate speech and communal violence seeming to escalate every single day, and with the impression gaining ground that the authorities are neither neutral nor impartial, we ask, what sort of country is India becoming? That's the key issue I shall raise today with the former Chief Justice of the Madras and Delhi High Courts and former Chairman of the Law Commission, Justice Ajit Prakash Shah. Justice Shah, before we come to details and specifics, let me start with a general question. Almost every day we hear hate speech. Almost every day we read about communal violence. Both as a judge, but also as a citizen, are you worried about the sort of country India is becoming?
What sort of country India is becoming? It's a bit complex question. I would be addressing two or three aspects. The first is I see a clear emergence of electoral autocracy. In electoral autocracy, the leader is elected by the popular mandate, but he uses the very democratic institutions to kill democracy. For example, in India today, with the current regime, almost all accountability institutions like Election Commission, Human Rights Commission, and other commissions, media, and investigating agencies, they are all compromised. So the very institutions are used to kill democracy. You don't need, modern history shows that you don't need soldiers or generals to subvert democracy. The democracy and the rule of law is subverted in this manner. The second part, which I would like to address, is the polarization on communal lines, which you mentioned, that every day you hear hate speeches, etc. Now, this is no longer for short electoral gains. It has achieved kind of a national character. If you recall, Veer Savarkar propounded or the idea of Hindu Rashtra, Hindu Zat, and Hindu Sanskriti, that is Hindu nation, Hindu race, and Hindu culture. Now he says that the British India is a Pitrubhumi and Punya Bhumi of Hindus. So the territory under British India could be ruled only by Hindu people, because their land of religion as well as land of ancestry is India, whereas the land of religion of Christians or Muslims is outside India. So they don't have equal rights along with the Hindus. He actually justified Hitler's treatment of Jews, saying that what Jews did for Germany. So this is a kind of a philosophy which you percolating in the present times. Now you must remember that the Ambedkar said that if this Hindu Rashtra becomes a reality, it would be the greatest calamity for the nation. And you also remember that 80% of the Constituent Assembly members were Hindus, but they rejected the idea of Hindu Rashtra. They actually they envisioned an India of Indian people, and therefore our constitution begins with the we the people. And the last part I would like to address is the constitution is systematically weakened. I mean, take for instance pushing non-money bills as money bills, not recognizing the opposition leader. So these are small things, but as one writer says, the constitution is being killed by thousand cuts. By small things here or there, we see that the constitution is completely compromised. So these are, according to me, very dangerous times.
So you believe India is actually sliding downhill, to use a colloquial phrase, steadily but fast?
Yes, towards autocracy.
Let's then, against this background, look at how the Delhi police and the Municipal Corporation of Delhi responded to and treated the Supreme Court's orders on Wednesday in the Jahangir Puri case. Almost 2 hours after the Supreme Court stayed the demolitions were still continuing. It was only after the Chief Justice of India reiterated his order and specifically asked the registrar of the court to immediately inform the Commissioner of Police, the Mayor, and other officials that the demolition stopped. In your eyes, does this amount to contempt of court? And if it does, should the officials be punished?
See, this according to me is the gross defiance of the court orders. Police and administration have become very powerful. And I find these days that there are several instances where they have shown scant regard for the judiciary. If really Supreme Court wants to do justice to those people who are affected by this high-handed action, then the Supreme Court must take appropriate action, send the guilty officers to jail, impose penalties, fines, and most importantly, Karan, the Supreme Court must restore the status quo ante. They must allow the affected people to reconstruct their shops or stalls, whatever is there. They should also the fixed compensation for those who suffered at this absolutely brutal action at the hands of the administration and the police.
But you're absolutely clear that the erring officials who were in gross defiance of the court must not only be fined, they should be sent to jail.
Of course, see this order of the Supreme Court not only pronounced in the open court, but it became, it was actually displayed on almost all media channels, and everybody knew about the Supreme Court. Now, if the authorities take a shameless stand that they had not received the order, this is no excuse. I feel that this is a matter where a very strict action against the erring officials.
We're talking about the mayor of Delhi. We're talking about the police commissioner of Delhi. We're talking about several special commissioners and deputy commissioners. All of them fall under that ruling. They should be punished. They should be sent to jail.
If they are guilty, if they are found guilty, they should be punished according to law. And it is the BJP president who wrote a letter to the MCD, and the next day, on the basis of this letter, the demolition starts. So all these circumstances must be taken into account while deciding the rights of those whose everything is taken away overnight.
Now, you've already said the Supreme Court must restore status quo ante. The Supreme Court must fix compensation for those whose homes were wrongly demolished. With that in the background, let me take you through what happened both in Jahangirpuri earlier this week, as well as in Khargone in Madhya Pradesh over Ram Navami. There are several issues here, Justice Shah, and I'll take you through them one by one. First, literally a couple of days after communal violence, in fact, a riot had happened in both these areas, the authorities decided to demolish alleged encroachments. First, in terms of timing, shouldn't they have waited for peace and harmony and order to be restored before taking action which would inevitably cause pain and anguish and arouse anger?
I believe that the whole objective is to create more tension and deeper polarization. That's the objective. I mean, no sensible administration could have gone to the extent of demolishing the houses in that area immediately after the riot. But there are other aspects which I'm really worried. See, in this case, the law relating to the demolition, right, was not followed at all. Law laid down by the Supreme Court and the various high courts. Now, the right to livelihood and right to housing, right to home, is considered to be a right protected under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Now, there are various rights, like right to receive a prior notice, then right to make a representation. Then there are various schemes. There are cutoff lines, for example, that if the structure existed prior to a particular date, then the person is entitled or might be entitled to an alternative land, alternative site, whatever it is. But the due process must be followed. And Karan, you must understand the the terrible consequences of forced evictions. Forced evictions have uh, horrible consequences for the those who are occupying those so-called illegal structures. Now they lose everything. They lose their livelihood. They lose their home. They lose their documents, belongings. And when you bring bulldozers and to just demolish their houses, now there are some documents which are very important, like the Russian card, Aadhaar card. There are some documents which will establish their right as a to show that the structure was really either legal or it is protected, but everything is lost by this illegal action. Then the another thing which came to my mind is the similarity of this action to what Sanjay Gandhi did in emergency. There are clear similarities. I mean, the way the demolition took place at the behest of Mr. Sanjay Gandhi, I mean, that's a terrible blot on our history. The same thing is happening. A particular community is targeted, and this is what Sanjay Gandhi did. And at that time, I believe that the court was completely compromised. I would say that these are harsh words, but this is what happened even in ADM Jabalpur case, where they said that the detainee has no right to access the court during emergency. But apart from that, now the one very heartening change which I noticed is the present day court, which is taking notice of it, which is intervening, and which is trying to protect these helpless citizens.
You made a very important point about the need for everything to be done through due process. Only then is it legal. I want to take you through this question of due process step by step. First, both in Khargan and in Jahangirpuri, the homes were demolished of people who were alleged to have thrown stones. In both places, senior BJP leaders actually publicly said this is what they were doing. Now, surely there is a need for due process to establish someone's guilt. At the moment, these people were only accused of throwing stones. It hadn't been proven, it hadn't been established. But when you demolish their homes, people who are just accused end up getting punished. Clearly, this is a miscarriage of justice.
Well, of course, apart from the fact that they are not convicted, they are simply accused by the other side. That's not sufficient. But apart from that, the most important point is that there is no system in our law to impose punishment for collective guilt. For example, the stones come from certain houses. Now, you cannot certain individuals throw stones. That you don't get a right to demolish the house and punish the entire family or all the relations. For example, the riots occurred in a particular area, and then you cannot demolish the houses and the other establishments in that area merely because the riots occur there. For example, suppose the people coming from outside have participated in these riots, are you going to punish everybody? That's called collective guilt, which is not permissible. Secondly, and most importantly, India is a signatory to certain conventions like UDHR and ICCSR, and there the homes and the livelihood are required to be protected. The India is bound to follow this international law, and in repeated judgment, the Supreme Court said that our fundamental rights in Part 3 should be read in the light of the international law. And the international law clearly prohibits this kind of imposition of the punishment on the basis of some kind of a collective guilt.
You're making a very important point, and I'll put it in simple terms for the audience. Even if it had been proven that some of these people are stone throwers, and by the way, it wasn't proven, they were just accused, they hadn't been found guilty, but even if it had been proven, you cannot demolish the house because then you are punishing their sisters, mothers, fathers, children who are not guilty. There is no system of collective punishment. You have to bear in mind that the punishment, if you're guilty, has to apply to the person who's guilty, not impose penalties on his mother, father, son, and brother. When you demolish homes, it's the family that suffers as well as the person who's guilty. But let me go one step further. What happened in this instance, according to the Indian Express? is that many people who clearly were not guilty, who could not have been stone throwers, had their houses demolished. In Khargon, the Indian Express says 3 men who had been in jail for a month and therefore could not have been involved in the riot and therefore could not have thrown stones, had their houses demolished. A widow called Hasina Fakhru, whose house was built under the PM Awas Yojna and therefore could not be illegal, it could not be an encroachment, had her house demolished. Now, these are innocent people. They did nothing wrong and their houses are demolished. In this instance, in addition to compensation, do they deserve an apology as well?
Not only apology, the complete reparation. What they lost on account of apart from the compensation, they should be allowed to. If the house is allotted under Indira Awas Yojna or Prime Minister's Awas Yojna, then it was a legal structure. They had no business to demolish the structure. And this is what happens when you take law into your own hands. Then you start demolishing structures left, right, and center. This is the outcome. So the complete reparation is the only remedy. And of course, there is a clear need for apology to these people. But I don't think that the present administration in Khargam or in Delhi is in a mood to listen to this, mood to listen to reason, and it understand the plight of these people. These are all marginalized, poor people, and they are being targeted by the
Can I ask you
administration.
this? Can I ask you this, Justice Shah? You clearly said there's not just a need for complete reparation, but also apology. Who should the apology come from? The sub-inspector who did the demolition, the police commissioner under whom the police force functions, or the home minister who eventually is the man who is responsible for the police and the buck stops with him? Who should give the apology?
It should be at the highest level. I'm not going to say something happens at the site. But there is a moral responsibility. The administration should take up that moral responsibility, and the highest person in that particular department or the who is handling these matters is liable to say sorry. What's wrong with it? This is, and they are citizens of this country, and if you have taken, you have wrongly deprived their livelihood, surely there's no nothing.
I won't embarrass you by asking you who is the highest person. I'll point out myself that in Delhi, the police function under the Home Minister of India. They take orders from him. Therefore, he is the highest person as far as police actions in Delhi are concerned. But let me come now to a second explanation given by the police and frequently given by the BJP leaders in Delhi for the demolitions in Jahangirpuri. They claimed that these were encroachments on public land. Now, even if they were, shouldn't each person be given a notice and shouldn't each person be given time to appeal? And if that didn't happen, then isn't that once again a gross miscarriage of justice?
Well, if you look at the timing, it happens immediately after the riot, and the state machinery starts moving after receiving the letter from the president of the BJP. So it is clearly connected with the riots, and not really a bona fide action against the unauthorized settlements or unauthorized constructions. And even if they are unauthorized, as I said earlier, the due process of law must be followed. Just as I said, that there are human, and in this whole matter, Karan, I believe that where is humanity? Where are the basic human considerations? That these are not the people who they live hand to mouth. And remember, when you talk of one more thing, I would like to point out: this whole city of Delhi, of the rich, the upper class, the middle class, who is their help, their maid servants, their gardeners, their security guards, where they come from? They all live in an unauthorized colony. Please remember that this city functions because of these people. Don't undermine them. We live in comfort. We get all these facilities, because of this large masses who live in these colonies, because for whatever reason the government is not in a position to afford them low
In
cost
fact,
housing.
Justice Shah, you're making a very important point. Scenic Farm, where some of the richest people in Delhi live, is said to be almost entirely unauthorized. They could start there with their demolitions, but they don't. Gautam Bhatia, writing in the Hindustan Times, says 65% of Delhi's colonies are unauthorized, but they choose to pick one where 2 days earlier there had been a riot, where the president of the Delhi BJP had accused people of being stone throwers and demanded that their houses be demolished. The political linkages and the direction of what's happening, targeted at the poor rather than the rich, is so obvious to everyone.
I believe I recall that when I was in Delhi High Court, I mean, this issue about the Scenic Farm came much from, I think it is from 90s. 30 years or 40 years have passed, but no action, they could not be touched. So what does it indicate? I mean, is it a application of law, equal-handed application of law? It's a clear discrimination against the poor and marginalized.
Justice Shah, while we're still talking about demolitions and communal violence, before we talk separately about hate speech, I want to put to you two examples that emerged forcefully on television, and they are to do with human beings. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about human beings and how they have been badly treated. NDTV says that in Jahangirpuri, a shopkeeper, a Muslim shopkeeper whose shop has stood on the same ground for 16 years, suddenly found one morning on Wednesday his shop had been demolished. He told the channel, "Not once in those 16 years have I got a notice that my shop is illegal. Not once have I got a notice that it's encroached." And he then said to the channel, "I've been treated wrongly and badly." Would you agree he's been treated badly?
Of course. I mean, it is a complete misconception that this idea of the illegal colonies only occupied by Muslims or some infiltrators, this is all wrong. There are all from all communities everywhere, and he's absolutely right. You allow the shop to continue. We allow him to do some small business there. Now, what right you have got to just overnight? I mean, this just go there with bulldozers and take away everything he has. I mean,
Let,
it's a complete. I mean, the words you use, the miscarriage of justice.
let me cite a second example. This time, not just from NDTV, but brought to light by one of NDTV's best reporters, Saurabh Shukla. He pointed out that in Jahangirpuri, the gate outside a mosque had been demolished, but the demolition had happened a whole hour, it seems, after the Supreme Court had stayed the demolition. So already it was illegal. But side by side with that mosque is a Hindu temple, which had also clearly encroached on public space, but its encroachments were not touched. Afterwards, Saurabh Shukla pointed out, once the demolitions had stopped, the temple authorities themselves removed their illegal or allegedly illegal structure. Doesn't this suggest that when the demolitions were happening, Muslims were being targeted and efforts were being made to protect Hindus?
I really don't want to know, because I don't know the facts about the temple and the mosque. But I must tell you that there were forced evictions. I mean, that's a part of the history, our culture. This has been happening. But these times, I see a great difference. I see a clear campaign against Muslims. As I said, that this hate campaign has acquired a national character. Now, you must consider this kind of the singling out a particular community. On some recent what is happening in the country. The first is there are these dog whistles, like the issues are raised: hijab, halal meat, the prayers in the open space, love jihad, loudspeakers, and whatever. These are all dog whistles. These are communal attacks against the minorities. And what is more troubling is the state's interference in the life of the ordinary people, be it food, be it kind of food we eat, kind of dress we wear, the kind of what kind of worship we have, whom we should worship, or whom we should marry, or whom we should love. All these love jihad laws, take for example, I mean, so this is a blatant interference in the personal lives of the people. The state has no business to interfere with their personal life, and this is what is known as cultural nationalism. This happened in Nazi Germany, this happened everywhere, and now this is what is happening in the and the only one other aspect I would wish to point out. The other day, the Mr. Pratapan Mehta, he pointed out, I mean, very important factor, this false sense of victimhood. So you say, oh, we took a procession silently in some, or the procession in some area, and there were stones, and then the Hindus are the victims. It's a completely distorted version. I mean, there is no such threat. These are this is the way to the invoke communal frenzy.
One more question about Jahangir Puri before I change subjects and talk about hate speech. Yesterday, the police have cordoned off the area, literally barricaded it. Politicians can't go to comfort the aggrieved. Journalists can't go to cover what's happened to them. It's been barricaded and it's treated like a war zone. What do you make of that?
This is again the whole object seems to be the way things happened either in Kharkov or here is to create a fear psychosis in the minds of the minorities. If you resist, this is what happens. Here areas you cannot see anybody, you cannot uh, have they cannot speak or cannot have any kind of you cannot take your grievances to anybody. So this is the again this kind of I understand the law and order situation, but in the many in the past, wherever the riots occurred, the first thing was done was to attempt to diffuse tensions. This is not happening here.
Absolutely. Let's now come to the second big subject I want to raise with you, hate speech. In December, from a Dharm Sansad of all places, we heard calls for Muslim genocide and ethnic cleansing. Eventually, Yati Narsinganand was arrested. When he was released on bail, it was on the specific condition that he wouldn't repeat such hate speech again. But he's done it, not just once, he's done it twice. That's a clear breach of his bail conditions, and the police have done nothing. They're silent. They're leaving him to carry on as he wants. What do you make of that?
See, let me first state the very fundamental point. Hate speech is the root cause of many of the violence all over the not only in our country but all over the world. Hate speech gives to a lot of violations of law. Ultimately, it resulted into that. And this is a hate speech today, not only in India but many other countries, is a serious challenge to the rule of law and the constitutional system or a democratic system. Now, what is happening now is the you find hate speeches. Now there is no longer correct. There is no longer a fringe element. Earlier, I heard this argument. Oh, this is a fringe element amongst the ruling regime. This hate, fringe element has become mainstream. Let us take it this way. And this mainstream is carrying out this hate campaign, which is now, as I said earlier, is attaining a national character. Now, hate speech is everywhere. There is hate speech in social media. There are hate speeches in the digital media, the proper media. There is in electoral campaigns everywhere. What happened to the hate speeches given by the ruling regime? For example, Kapil Mishra or Anurag Thakur. What happened to those hate speeches? The police said that they could not find any hate speech on the Gaddaro ko goli maro is not a hate speech. So there are many such utterances you will find in the election campaign and the Delhi riots which happened last year. So that's and the court did not take notice. What happened in Delhi High Court? Justice Murlidhar, who actually took an action against these hate speeches or about to take an action, and then he was transferred overnight. Now, then the the matter simply kept on adjourning in spite of the Supreme Court admonishing the learned judges that it should be decided why the FIRs are not filed. I believe that this issue has has come up again before the Delhi High Court. But really, the hate speech is the root cause of this of the country, which is now the kind of violence and the other woes of the country.
Justice Shah, you're talking about the Delhi High Court and the way it has handled these issues to do with the last riots in Delhi. You were Chief Justice of that court. Today, when you look at how your court is behaving, are you disappointed? Are you disillusioned? Do you feel let down?
No. I believe that some of the judgments are absolutely. I can cite one judgment of Justice Mudul and Justice Bambani. I mean, in that where they granted bail, where the matter is now pending in the Supreme Court, and there are many such orders. But the overall, I don't believe that I'm not talking only about the
Can
Delhi
I
High Court, but
can I
yes,
interrupt? Can I point
yes,
out? Can I point out what Justice Chandra Dhari Singh said on the 26th of March? That's not even 3 weeks ago. And he's a judge of the Delhi High Court. He said, and I'm quoting him, if you're saying something with a smile, then there's no criminality. If you're saying something offensively, then criminality. You were Chief Justice of this court. Today, a judge from the same court says, if you say something hateful, but with a smile on your face, it's not criminal. Do you accept that?
I read about this, the observation of the learned judge, and frankly, I was astonished. It's very strange to say that if you say something, you say that you instigate to kill people of the other community, other caste, etc., and you say it laughingly or smilingly. What facial expression has to do with any connection with the hate speech? Hate speech is a hate speech. It's supposedly, I mean, for example, I believe that Goebbels was a very powerful orator, and he was very sarcastic. And suppose he said something smilingly. I mean, the atrocities against the Jews were the clear message, not that because he said something smilingly, the effect or the implication of that would be taken away. I believe that this is a clearly an erroneous observation.
Let's come back to Yati Narasimhanand. He's not once but twice broken his bail condition. He's indulged in hate speech. The police have not taken any action to revoke his bail. Shouldn't the courts step in? Is it not incumbent on them?
Of course, it is incumbent. Courts are the guardian of the Constitution, and it's their duty to protect the secular structure of this country. I mean, if this happens, and in fact, when these matters about the violation of the bail conditions and other hate speeches went to the Supreme Court has realized that the stance taken by the Delhi police is not correct. And as I read in today's newspaper, that the Supreme Court said that you better file a better affidavit. But what is required to be done is the hate speech should be handled with a very firm and heavy hand. Now, take for example the violation of the bail condition. What is the effect of the hate speech? Now, I read that one of the Munis, Muni Udasin, he addressed particularly to Muslim women or Muslim generally that you and your pigstry will cease to exist. Now, if this is this is not a hate speech, and the courts are not going to intervene, and I believe that the courts are the only hope is now the courts. It's the last bastion for the citizens of this country, and it's a duty of the court. When the people expect a lot from the court, I mean, maybe they are not right all the time. I mean, but when the opposition is weak and confused, and the institutions are all compromised, it's the judiciary which has a greater role to play to protect the rule of law and the Constitution.
Do you believe the judiciary is playing that role? I'm not talking of the Supreme Court. I'm talking of the judiciary that the ordinary Indian man faces, the lower judiciary, the magistrates. That's the first face of the judiciary. Are they really playing their role properly?
I would say that it's a mixed bag, but to be very frank, I found that the in recent times, I mean, there is a, of course, there is, I see a very welcome change in the approach of the Supreme Court. I mean, I don't want to divide the courts into different periods, but I see there is something very positive. But it's a mixed bag. It's very difficult to make a general assessment, but I still expect the that the judiciary should be more sensitive to the problems of the people. It's really needed now. This is the times where the judiciary do not stand by those who are oppressed and suppressed. I mean, there is no future for this
A,
country.
a lot
Future.
of a lot of the problem, Justice Shah, happens at the level of the police and the way they enforce the law, or the way they deliberately refuse to enforce the law. We know how they're handling hate speech because, in fact, the Supreme Court has sent back that affidavit and said, give me a better one. But look at what happened in Jahangirpuri. For instance, we know that hate speech incites violence, it creates enmity. What about Shobha Yatras, where people are brandishing swords, where people are holding up publicly weapons and other knives, and they do this in vicinity of a mosque? That too is inciting violence, yet the police permitted this in Jahangirpuri. Shouldn't they have stopped it? And shouldn't this have been obvious to stop?
I'll tell you something from my childhood memories, and this will put the matter in context. See, it's not that these processions were not taken out in the past, very provocative public processions. I come from a town in Maharashtra called Sholapur. So there was always a communal tension. And incidentally, my maternal grandfather was the president of All India Hindu Mahasabha in those times. So the what would happen in the as a in my school, I remember that every time at the Ganesh Chaturthi, there would be a procession, Ganesh procession. Idols were taken for Visarjan, and then they would insist that they would pass by the masjid and whatever, and there were fundamentalist forces on both sides, and few shops would be burned, and few people would be killed. This has become almost routine thing. Now the but this has now acquired a very different proportion. There, by and large, in the earlier periods, I found that the administration and police were largely, I'm not saying they're completely impartial, but largely independent, neutral. There were very fine police officers. They handled the riots with a very great skill. I remember somebody, I mean, like Prakash Singh or some other police officer wrote that you can stop the riots within no time. I mean, you can take action against such provocative processions, etc. But today the change is, and that's a worrying part. Change is the administration and the police is completely compromised. Is completely biased today, and that is what happens. When the politicians control these agencies, the investigating agencies or the police or the other agencies, there is. In fact, I'm glad that Mr. Yogi Adityanath, the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, said that he is without procession, without permission, no Shubhayatra will be taken up. I don't know how it's going to play out finally, but this should be stopped completely.
Two
You have
last
a
questions. Two last
yeah.
questions before I end. We see around us hate speech escalating, communal violence escalating, and at the same time, we notice there is complete silence from the Prime Minister, from the Home Minister, from every single member of the government. Nothing. Is it not incumbent on them, as the government of this country, to speak out and condemn what's happening?
That's the most worrying part. Those highest in power. I mean, those really who who the fate of the country, the future of the country is in their hands. This is, I believe that the just one statement from the Prime Minister can put an end to this. All this is happening. I mean, and he always says, and I'm happy about that. He says "Sabka Saath." I mean, if Sabka Saath, if you really want welfare of all, then it's really up to the prime ministers and his senior colleagues to say, at least to say, condemn. I mean, I heard this. I mean, many people saying that why not the Muslims condemn the attacks on or atrocities or terrorist attacks? Surely they should condemn. I mean, there is no doubt about it. Perhaps there are, but the same yardstick should apply to the those in power. If they do not condone, I mean, this is taken. The unfortunate part is that this is taken as a tacit approval. That's the outcome of this.
One last question, and this is my last question. We all see what's happening. We can all recognize what's happening. None of us is blind to it. But the vast majority of us as citizens, I'm talking of ordinary Indian citizens, are also quiet. Do we have a moral duty to stand up and say, enough is enough, this is unacceptable, it must stop?
Of course, I mean, I would say that it's for the ordinary citizens. Only the ordinary people can bring about that change, that kind of they can really rise against this situation. And they should understand that this is not the India which was envisioned by our founding fathers. Our founding, just consider this, that look at the Pakistan became a religious state, it became an Islamic state, and this was their constitution. But 80% of our founding fathers said, no, 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 we will not. And compare the two countries where we are, where India stands as a country. We have achieved a lot. And as a secular country, we have achieved a lot. I mean, it's not it's our duty, the citizens' duty, to speak up, to raise our voices, and to talk of, we just bring sanity in this situation. I mean, this is what I believe that I don't want to lecture, but I believe that as a citizen, and if you see the duties chapter which is added in the Constitution,
Absolutely, sir.
one of the duties which is cast is to maintain scientific temperament. I mean,
Justice sir, I want to thank you for speaking loudly, clearly, and if I may add, boldly. There's a lot that you've said in this interview. People will have to watch it because practically every answer of yours was an answer to sit up and listen to carefully. But I want to just identify 3-4 important things. We are becoming an electoral autocracy. The response from the mayor, the police commissioner, other officials to the Supreme Court stay orders on demolition was gross defiance, and they should be found guilty and jailed. You said the police are completely compromised, completely biased. But the most important thing you said was that if due process is not followed, then the rule of law is being trampled upon. And that is what happens not in a civilized democracy, that's what happens in a barbaric state. This is a wake-up call to all of us. I thank you for this interview. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan. You also take care. Thank you very much.